Narthamvilas Prabhu, and Puna Mataji. Thank you for joining. So everyone can see the Veda base, yeah?
Yes, Prabhu, we can see the Veda base, Prabhu.
Okay. Yesterday, while I was doing Bhagavatam, I think class, sometimes devotees are saying that, or somebody was telling me that the internet connection was breaking. So that's why I'm asking. Okay, we'll start. Thank you very much for joining us today for Bhagavatam class. Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Narayana Namaskritam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayadudire Srinivata Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hirdana Antosya Padrani Vidmuti Sutsatam Nashtaprayashu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. So I will show the verse we're reading. I think Nartam Vilas Prabhu, you read and spoken number 28 last week, correct?
Yes, Prabhuji. Yeah.
Okay. So here's the verse. Ya Virya Sulkena Hita Swambari Brahmatya Chaida Pramukham Hi Sushminaha Pradumna Sadambamba Sutadayo Para Yachaharta Bhamavade Sahasrasaha Ya Virya Sulkena Hita Swambari Brahmatya Chaida Pramukham Hi Sushmina Pradumna Sambamba Sutadaya Para Yachaharta Bhamavade Sahasrasaha Ya Virya Sulkena Hita Swambari. I think somebody's mic is on, so hearing background. Neela Mataji, can you mute? It looks like that might be. Thank you so much, Mataji. Sorry. Ya Virya Sulkena Hita Swambari Brahmatya Chayeda Paramukam Hi Sushmina Pradumna Sada Amba Sutadayo Para Yaschaharta Bhama Vade Sahasrashaha. Would anybody like to repeat?
Ya Virya Sulkena Hruta Swayamvare Pramatya Chaidya Pramukhan Hi Sushminaha Pradyumna Sambamba Sutadayo Para Yaschakrita Bhaumavadhi Sahasrasaha. Thank you, Prabhuji. Krishna.
Thank you very much, Mataji, for the beautiful recitation. Anyone else would like to try?
Ya Virya Sulkena Hrita Swayamvare Pramatya Chaidya Pramukhan Hi Sushminaha Pratyumna Sambamba Sutadayo Para Yascha Hrita Bhauma Vade Sahasrasaha.
Thank you, Chandrasekhar Prabhu. Anyone else?
Ya Virya Sulkena Hrita Swayamvare Pramatya Chaitya Pramukhan Hi Susminaha Pradyumna Sambamba Sutadayo Para Yascha Hrita Bhaumavade Sahasraha. Hare Krishna, thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Harshita Mataji. Okay, one last chance. Okay, thank you all. So I'll show, we'll do the word by word and then kind of go from there. Ya, the lady. Virya, prowess. Sulkena, by payment of the price. Hritaha, taken away by force. Swamvari, in the open selection of the bridegroom. Pramatya, harassing. Chiridya, King Shishupal. Paramukhan, headed by, he, positively. Shushashmanaha, all very powerful. Pradumna, Krishna's son. Samba, Amba, Suta Adaya, children. Aparaha, other ladies. Yaha, those. Cha, also. Arthaha, similarly brought Bhaumavade after killing kings, Sahasrashaha by the thousands. Translation by his and purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. I'll scroll. The children of these ladies are Pradyumna, Samba, Amba, etc. The ladies like Rukmini, Satyabhama, and Jambati were forcibly taken away by him from their Swamvara ceremonies after he defeated many powerful kings, headed by Shishupal. And other ladies were also forcibly taken away by him after he killed Bhamasura and thousands of his assistants. All these ladies are glorious. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Exceptionally qualified daughters of the powerful kings were allowed to make a choice of their own bridegrooms in open competition. And such ceremonies were called Swayamvara, or selection of the bridegroom. This kind of comes from the Sanskrit Swayam, meaning one's own self, and Vara means groom. So where a lady, a royal princess, has the ability to self-select her potential husband. Because the Swayamvara was an open competition between the rival and valiant princes, such princes were invited by the father of the princess. So this is, Kshatriya culture dating back to that time. And usually there were regular fights between the invited princely order in a sporting spirit. But it so happened that sometimes the belligerent princes were killed in such marriage fighting, and the victorious prince was offered the trophy princess for whom so many princes died. So, when the Kshatriya spirit, because they're very powerful at that time, sometimes even when one's, going through a process of presenting oneself in the most favorable light for a potential bride, it could get out of hand, and sometimes there were deaths that occurred from engaging in such almost play battles. Rukmini, the principal queen of Lord Krishna, was the daughter of the king of Vidarbha. So Vidarbha is it's basically what currently is Nagpur, like Maharashtra. And so the king wished that his qualified and beautiful daughter be given away to Lord Krishna, but her eldest brother, Rukmi, wanted her to be given away to King Shishupal. And this is because Rukmi was envious of Lord Krishna. And Shishupal happened to be a cousin of Krishna. So there was an open competition, and as usual, Lord Krishna emerged successful after harassing Shishupal and other princes by his unrivaled prowess. Rukmini had 10 sons like Pradyumna. There are other queens also taken away by Lord Krishna in a similar manner, in a similar way. Full description of this beautiful booty meaning like, I guess all this treasure of Lord Krishna in terms of all these wonderful queens will be given in 10th canto. There were 16,100 beautiful girls who were daughters of many kings and were forcibly stolen by Bhamasura. He's also called Narakshura in Bhagavatam. And he kept them as captives for his carnal desire. Carnal desire meaning his lusty desire. These girls prayed piteously to Lord Krishna for their deliverance, and the merciful Lord, called by their fervent prayer, released them all by fighting and killing Bhamasura. All these princesses were then accepted by Lord Krishna as his wives, although in the estimation of society, they were all fallen girls. All these captive princesses were then accepted by Lord Krishna as his wives, although in estimation of society, they were all fallen girls. The all-powerful Lord Krishna accepted the humble prayers of these girls and married them with adoration of queens. So altogether, Lord Krishna had 16,108 queens at Dwarka, and in each of them he begot 10 children. And as these children grew up, each of them had as many children as father. The aggregate of the family numbered in the millions. So, if you take 10 times 16,108, you see how many children. That was like 161,080 children. And then if you multiply that by at least 10, then you get like over 1.6 million children, not including the 16,108 wives or the 1,608, not including the 16,108 wives and the 161,000 children, direct children of Lord Krishna. So he was taking care of such a huge family. And what's the problem? He takes care of all the jivas in the entire universe. So the children of these ladies are Pradyumna, Samba, etc. Ladies like Rukmini, Satyabhama, and Jambati were forcibly taken away by him from the Swayamvara ceremonies after he defeated many powerful kings, headed by Shishupal, and other ladies were also forcibly taken away by him after he killed Bhamasura and thousands of his assistants. All these ladies are glorious. Here's the prayers, Mangal Charan prayers. Om Agyantimarandasya Jananjana Shlakaya Chakshurmritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Snapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupam Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Cha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tanamane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pacharane Nirvashesha Shunyavadi Pashtatai Deshatarane Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpati Gopesha Gopikanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sutadevi Pranami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Trupyascha Kripa Sindhubi Evacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So thank you very much for joining us today in reciting this verse from the Bhagavatam. And this is an unfathomable topic of the relationship of Lord Krishna with his queens. And frankly, this is above my capacity to speak. But I'll speak as per the teachings of Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas. So we're in chapter 10, canto 1. And it's describing the departure of Lord Krishna for Dwarka. So we read that Lord Krishna resides at Hastinapur for a few months, resided at Hastinapur for a few months after the Battle of Kurukshetra, basically to help give peace to all of his relatives and well-wishers who had gone through so much tragedy. Eventually, Lord asked permission to leave, and he had requested this from the king, who was Maharaj Yudhishthira, and Maharaj Yudhishthira gave that permission. So we read earlier on in the chapter how the Lord's relatives like Subhadra and Draupadi, Kunti, etc., how they nearly fainted because it's impossible for them to bear separation from Sri Krishna. And it also describes how the Pandavas were experiencing tremendous separation from him because they'd been all this time along during Kurukshetra and the time preceding Kurukshetra, they had been in association, intimate association with him in face to face, touching him. Arjun speaking to him. Arjun talks about sleeping and dining with him. So one can only imagine how close they are and how much they felt his separation when he was getting ready to leave. Eventually, from verse 20 onwards, it talks about how when Lord Krishna was departing, the royal ladies of the Kuru dynasty, the Kuru clan, went up on top of the palace in Hastinapur, and they showered flowers upon Bhagavan Shri Krishna, and Arjun took up an umbrella, which was beautiful, to shade Lord Krishna from the sun, and Uddhav and Satyaki started fanning Lord Krishna with beautiful fans. So at that point, the ladies of Hastinapur start speaking. So what I'd like to do for today, because it's all these topics can be spoken about for a long time, is to go over, get the flow of the chapter, specifically about the prayers of the ladies, and speak a little bit about the ladies, the royal ladies of Hastinapur, and then talk about this pastime of Bhamashura, so through Bhagavatam. And so that's the idea here. Let's see how it goes. So in verse 20, it's spoken that the ladies are absorbed in thought of the transcendental qualities of Bhagavan, who is Uttama Shloka. And they began to speak about them. And Srila Prabhupada has a wonderful section about how even the Vedas were attracted by the speech of the ladies. And in subsequent verses, Srila Prabhupada speaks about how the ladies must have heard the authority of the Vedas, because otherwise how can one speak that which attracts somebody, Lord Krishna, to them. And so Sridhar Swami has a really beautiful explanation of this statement where they say, absorbed in thought of transcendental qualities of the Lord, the ladies on the roof began to speak about him. And so Sridhar Swami is considered by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu the preeminent authority on the Bhagavatam and the first commentator. So he says the prayers of the ladies of Hastinapur, the royal ladies, attracted the attention of the Vedas, and that's understood from this verse. But he said even more special is that this prayers and this speech or realization came at a moment where they were in tremendous pain, because Lord Krishna was leaving Hastinapur for Dwarka. And he says something, and then if that's not enough, Sridhar Swami says, this indicates a power and the wonder of Lord Krishna's influence, that even while he was leaving them, they could glorify the residents of Dwarka and Vrindavan. So one who's absorbed in the pastimes of Lord Krishna has been purified by being absorbed in those pastimes, then that individual lacks envy. And so even though that individual may be going through so much pain personally, they can appreciate the service and the relationship that other devotees have with Lord Krishna. So I found that to be a very wonderful statement by Sridhar Swami. So moving on, they say in text 21, here he is, the original personality of Godhead, the source of all creation. So what they're trying to say is, and they mention that he existed before the modes of material nature. So what does that imply? That implies that the Lord is not a product of material energy, because he existed before the creation. So the idea is here that same Bhagwan, so I'm Rup Bhagwan, is present before him. He's completely spiritual, and there's no difference between his body and himself. So that's what that's implying. Then on 22, so what I'm trying to do is just give a flow of the chapter and of this verse, and then I'll kind of come into the specific verse we're speaking about. They say, here's the same Supreme Personality of Godhead. I'm sorry, that was in 21, saying, here's the same Supreme Personality of Godhead whose transcendental form is experienced by great devotees. So they're saying that this Lord Krishna is different than, this one that they talked about being involved in creation. Because he's actually, those are like the Purusha avatars. But here he is in front of us in Dwarka Yuga, demonstrating his eternal form and pastimes. And then the power of this particular verse is that it's highlighting that by pure devotion one can experience that same form by pure devotion, so that not only are they seeing Lord Krishna in his Swayambhuva original form and his pastimes, they're hearing and seeing his pastime. They're saying that those who are possessing bhakti, that the same form can be visible at all times. Then they go on to say, I'm going to skip a couple of verses. They talk about this potency of the land. How virtuous it is that this land has been glorified by his footprints, and that his childhood pastimes are taking place in that land. And specifically, they speak about Dwarka itself. How wonderful it is that Dwarka has defeated the glories of all the planets, because they're always seeing the glory of Dwarka is that every jiva there is seeing Bhagavan Krishna in his loving feature. So Srila Prabhupada in his purport here talks about how devotional service in these three places, Dwarka, Mathura, and Vrindavan, is magnified. And even more importantly, that one who goes there and follows the instructions of the six scriptures for sadhana bhakti, and eventually, more elevated, spontaneous devotion service, achieves the same result as obtained by those who were present during that time in Dwarka Yuga. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explains that residing in these holy dhams is one of the 5 most potent limbs of devotional service. And Srila Prabhupada explains that the reason this is so is because the abode of Lord Krishna and he himself are one and the same. And that a devotee who's practicing genuine devotional service can obtain that even at present moment. Like Srila Prabhupada said, I never left Vrindavan. So in number 28, which was read last week, the ladies go and glorify, Dwarkavasis even more. His wives whose hands he has accepted, how they must have undergone such vows and worship of the Lord to relish the nectar from his sweet lips. And then they highlight even more glory of the gopis in Vrindavan by saying, just by expecting such favors, not just like the ladies in Dwarka were experiencing them, they relished the kissing by Lord Krishna. They highlighted the immense devotion, the pinnacle of devotion by the Vrajbhumi devotees, the gopis, because they hadn't even experienced the kissing of Lord Krishna. They were just in expectation of that. They're trying to highlight how much more superior are the Dwarkavasis and the Vrajvasis, gopis, than themselves. And Srila Prabhupada says attainment of this stage of pure spiritual life is the highest perfection. And this is called Sarup, the identity of the jiva. And he says something very wonderful, that liberation means renovation of this stage of Sarup, meaning removal, purification to the point where one's actual spiritual identity is manifested. And now we're on this particular verse. Some acharyas group this verse with verse 30, but I'm just going to speak on 29 since that's the. So that gives you a sense of flow of what's going on here. So essentially, these series of verses are appreciation by the ladies of Hastinapur for Lord Krishna's queens in Dwarka. So last week when I was at Sadhu Sangha along with some of the other devotees there was a nice lecture. There were nice Bhagavatam lectures given by, His Holiness Giriraj Swami, Vaisheshik Prabhu, and His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami. So one thing that Vaisheshik Prabhu said stuck in my mind, and I've heard it previously from him. He said sometimes, when you apply for things like visas or passports, they ask you your occupation. And he said, the occupation for devotees is to be an appreciator. An appreciator. Somebody who, a Prabhu or Mataji who appreciate. And we can see here how the ladies are extending appreciation. The royal ladies of the Kuru dynasty are expressing the appreciation for the queens in Dwarka and the Brajvasis. So the idea is that the jiva is actually an appreciator. And we can see this in our Vaishnava Siddhanta and our Vaishnava culture, where Mangalartik with the Guru Ashtakam is nothing more than an appreciation of the Guru, and not just one's own Guru, but the line of Gurus. That's why in the Mangal Charan, it doesn't just say Guru, right? It says here, Shri Gurun, that's plural, Vaishnavas. So not just one's own, instructing or initiating Guru, but the entire line of Gurus. And then we do Tulsi Maharani Puja. That's also about appreciation of Tulsi Maharani and the privilege she gives to us to, be in the service of Shri Radha Krishna. And then, we do Guru Puja, appreciating Guru, and then we do Shingar Arti, etc. We say Vancha Kalpa when we see devotees, etc. We chant the Prasadam prayers. So this Vaishnava culture is a culture of appreciation. Why? Because Krishna is the supreme and he's appreciated, and that's our job. So the general principle in business is that we put money in a bank because by being in there, it gets appreciation and we get an increase in our investment. And that's called appreciation on one's investment. So the idea is whatever you appreciate, appreciates. Meaning things in our life that we appreciate and give attention to out of gratitude, they'll grow within us. There's a famous philosopher by the name of Voltaire. And I was sharing this with Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, and he found this to be a very superb statement. Voltaire said that whatever we appreciate in others, those good qualities, we will assume ourselves. They'll enter into our hearts, and we'll be able to take those on. So appreciation, he said, is such a good quality that whatever we appreciate in others, eventually those qualities will come into our own selves and manifest in our hearts. And of course, Chaitanya Charan Prabhuji does this to an infinite extent. He's an emblem of appreciation. But this is good for us too, who maybe try to strive for that. So to appreciate the devotional service of others, to appreciate Krishna and so forth, one's capacity to appreciate increases, just like putting money in a bank appreciates. And every living being has that capacity. Yeah, we see that even amongst animals, even though they may have covered consciousness, like for example, a bear who would normally attack a person can appreciate the love and caring of its caretaker. And so oftentimes you see photos of big, huge bears like engulfing their caretaker, but they're very gentle with them. So every living being has that capacity of appreciation. And as we become purified, like these ladies became purified by hearing the Shastra, Srila Prabhupada points out that these kind of prayers cannot come out of somebody who's not heard from Shastra. Our ability, as we become purified, our ability to appreciate Krishna and his devotees increases more and more. Yesterday in our Bhagavatam discussion, we were speaking about the prayers of Lord Prahlad Maharaj for Lord Nrsimhadev. And the prayers exemplify remembrance of the Lord by hearing from Narad Muni, and then glorification of the Lord, and then purification, which leads into absorption and appreciation. That's simply the flow of Prahlad Maharaj's prayers. It's a request for purification so that he can become more absorbed in Lord Krishna and his glories. So this is because the soul, when it's purified, is actually naturally and eternally an appreciator. Because the soul appreciates Krishna's pleasure and the privilege of serving Krishna and his devotees. And this is the relationship between the pure devotees and Bhagavan Sri Krishna. Why are they pure devotees? Because they're nirmalam. All the dirt in the heart, nirmala. Mal is dirt, nir meaning without dirt. All that dirt has been removed. So, I wanted to highlight that about the Hastinapur Vasis, the ladies in the Kuru clan, the royal princesses, etc. That they're very elevated. They can speak like this when Krishna is about to leave them. We all have experienced when a very sweet devotee is at our house and we've had a chance to be with them, serve them, take their association, and how when they leave, it's painful. And you can imagine what pain these royal ladies in Hastinapur are going through, yet they're appreciating Krishna and those that he's very dear to because of the purity of those devotees. So I wanted to highlight that what's the lesson from here? The lesson from here is the quality of appreciation, because that's our nature as a jiva, to be an appreciator of Krishna and everything that is Krishna's. And by doing that, it helps us grow in devotional service. So now I'm going to speak about, most of you have heard about Rukmini, Satyabhama, Champati. I wanted to speak about, and they're obviously glorious because they're the queens of very empowered dynasties, but so are these other 16,100 ladies that Krishna recovered from Bhamasura. Although in the estimation of society, they were all fallen girls because they were associated with Bhamasura, yet Lord Krishna accepted them. So I wanted to speak about that. So like I said, in the past Kshatriya culture, kings often had more than one wife. And you also see that in like the royal culture of the European, dynasties as well in more recent time. So Krishna had 8 principal queens, Rukmini being one of them. But he also married 16,100 wives. And Srila Prabhupada says something very wonderful. A lot of people, when they hear about Krishna, and they hear about Krishna having 16,108 wives, they kind of question Krishna's morality and that he must be a lusty individual. But of course, we as devotees know that Krishna is moved by, he's Atmarama, and since he's unlimited, how can that which is limited, meaning a jiva, give him more pleasure than he himself contains? So Srila Prabhupada speaks about that in Canto 2. But that's not possible. So Krishna, therefore, because he's unlimited, he has to manifest the unlimited within himself as Srimati Radharani or Shri Sita Devi in order to experience that unlimited bliss. He's with these 60,108 wives simply because of their devotion to him. And that's explained in the next chapter when Krishna actually arrives in Dwarka and how the ladies were all smiling at him. But Srila Prabhupada says Krishna smiled back, but not at their beauty. He was smiling at their devotion for him because he was self-satisfied. So Srila Prabhupada said that one shouldn't be surprised if Krishna had married even 16 million wives because Krishna is unlimited. And Srila Prabhupada said we should actually take note that Krishna only married 16,108 wives. So, in this, moving on, in this chapter, 59, it describes this pastime. This is in Canto 10, chapter 59, the killing of the demon Naraka. And Narakasura is also the same as Brahmashura. So, so I'll summarize. Once there was a king, he was demon, called Narakashura or Brahmashura, and he was, as all demon kings do, create disturbance. So he was stealing treasure and ladies from others. And so Indradev requested Krishna to help adjust this situation. So Krishna went on Garuda towards Brahmashura. And it describes beautifully how Krishna appeared like a blackish rain cloud, shining while he's gliding by the sun. So Lord Krishna and his wife Satyabhama looked like a cloud with lightning sitting above the sun. So when he arrived at Brahmasura's fortress, Krishna found that it was surrounded by many protective physical barriers, but also huge army of military. So Krishna killed Brahmasura's military commanders, and he eventually killed Brahmasura with the use of Sudarshan Chakra. And after Brahmasura's death, Krishna entered into Brahmasura's palace. And there he saw 16,000 royal maidens whom Brahma had taken by force from various kings. He was a demon, he was stealing the riches of others. So, but the Srila Prabhupada points out that, or the commentators point out, and this is from Vaishnava Chakravarti Thakur, that they were actually not 16,000, but actually 16,100 royal maidens imprisoned in that palace. And it's quoted from Vishnu Purana. Within the maiden quarters, O wise one, that Lord of unequaled prowess found 16,100 princesses. So, and then the women became enchanted when they saw, Krishna enter the palace. In their minds, they accepted him as their husband because they were attracted to him. And they desired, that may Lord Krishna become my husband. And they had that in their heart. So, when they saw him, they were captivated by his beauty. His beauty and himself are one and the same. So they prayed for his causeless mercy and a desire to become his wives. So demon Bhamasura, when he carried off the ladies, these 16,100 ladies, he dishonored them. And they knew that by being next to somebody with this kind of character, any potential future bridegroom would doubt their purity. So they prayed for his mercy. Acharyas explained that this desire to have him as husband is a prayer for his mercy to become his wives, because no one else would have married them. And the Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur and other acharyas explained that Krishna, residing as super soul in everyone's heart, can understand their pure desire. So he accepted that situation. And it wasn't just a token, okay, I'll take you as my wives and I'll enjoy with you. It was actually Krishna being very genuine. It wasn't just a token of acceptance, it was actually a commitment. Marriage is a commitment between a husband and a wife to, help each other be there and be present. So Krishna committed to becoming present as their faithful husband for each and every one of them. And so he expanded himself into 16,100 forms. Imperishable Supreme Personality assumed a separate form for each bride. So a personal expansion, not a separated expansion, and duly married each of them simultaneously at each of the 16,108 wives. So he's proving that he's Bhagwan, because only Bhagwan can do this. So he accepted them, not because he was trying to gratify senses, but because of their pure devotion. As we said, Krishna's Atma Rama, self-satisfied. And in the spiritual world, he's actually served by thousands and thousands of goddesses of fortune, right? Like each of the 8 principal wives of Lord Krishna and Dwarka are manifestation of Sri Devi, Lakshmi. Only because they prayed to him in their pure hearts did Krishna agree to accept them. And Srila Prabhupada makes comment that, like I said, this is not amazing. Krishna could have married 16 million wives. And that this is not at all, some people say this is impossible to be a husband to 16,108 wives. It's hard enough for me to be a husband of one wife, right? I'm sure the Matajis feel the same way about Prabhus. So Krishna, Srila Prabhupada explains that Krishna expands himself into the heart of each and every living being as Paramatma to give remembrance, forgetful, and knowledge. So, what is the impossibility of marrying 16,108 wives? So the idea here is that, look at this, that Krishna manifested identical forms. And that's explained here by the commentary. So these commentaries were done after Srila Prabhupada departed from his earthly Leela. So the devotees his disciples who wrote this, looked at the books of the acharyas. And the idea here is that Krishna here, Tvad Rupa Dharo Avyaya, that he assumed, that imperishable Krishna assumed many, many forms for each bride. So although Krishna has one body, he appeared in separate forms and he controlled all of them simultaneously. It's not simply a multiplication, but actual expansion, personal expansion. And Narad Muni confirms this in 2 chapters later. they meaning avyaya, meaning they were not partial, they were complete manifestations. And so Bhagavan Krishna, once he manifested this, he remained with each of the queens. And satisfied each of them, right? So Krishna was, enjoying being with each queen, and each queen thought that Krishna is associating only with me, and all the other queens are suffering separation from him. I'm so fortunate. They actually thought that. So commentaries that are made is that therefore Dwarka is much more superior to Vaikuntha, because in Vaikuntha, Narayanji reciprocates like this with only one, Sri Devi, Lakshmi. Whereas in Dwarka, Krishna is doing this with 16,108 wives. So, they're very, very elevated, the Dwarkavasis, and so are the Braj Gopis, because they're enjoying Krishna in that, situation. So we see this, we kind of get a second-hand glimpse of this, or a third-hand glimpse through when this chapter 69, when Narad Muni goes and visits Krishna in his Dwarka palaces. So let me find that section. So Narad Muni eventually goes to Dwarka. He had heard about this, and so he wanted to see it himself. So the chapter describes how he saw the beauty of the Dwarka palaces and Krishna with each and every one of his wives. And then he went to where Rukmini was situated. And, he saw that Rukmini was personally serving Krishna, even though she was constantly attended by 1,000 maidservants. And then, so he was seeing this, and Lord Krishna at that point, when he was Rukmini Devi, he saw the presence of Narad, and so he arose from his position next to her and bowed down to Sri Narad Muni and requested him to come take up his own seat, because he's trying to uphold the religious principles that a Brahmana should be always honored at all times. And Narad Muni was, of course, super qualified, and he actually bathed Narad Muni's feet, etc., and took the Charamrita on his own head, similar to, with Sudama Brahman. And, the Bhagavatam talks about the Lord favoring such pure Brahmanas, not just ones that are Brahmanas by birth, but who have Brahmanical qualities. So, Lord says to Narad, what can we do, meaning him and Rukmini Devi, do for him? And Narad Muni, once again, the job of a devotee is to be an appreciator. So Narad Muni says, it's no surprise that the ruler of all the world, shows friendship for all people, yet you subdue the envious. Your glories are widely sung. Now I have seen your feet, which grant liberation to your devotees. Please favor me so I can constantly think about you as I travel about. Please grant me the power to remember you. What a beautiful prayer. Please grant me remembrance. Dhyams charami anugraham yatha smriti syat. What a beautiful prayer that is. Dhyan, and constantly thinking, may I travel with remembrance of your lotus feet. May that be, your blessing upon me. That's really sweet. How wonderful is that, prayer. So then the Bhagavatam describes in great detail in this chapter how Narada went to another place. He saw Krishna playing dice with the ladies, with a queen, with one queen, and Uddhav was present. Actually, Uddhav was present at all the palaces. And then he went to another palace where he found Krishna fondling his children. And Srila Prabhupada or the Acharyas explained that when Narada arrived at that other palaces, Krishna acted like he didn't know what was happening in the other palace of Rukmini. So at that point, Narada Muni understood that Krishna is simultaneously present in actually both palaces, although performing different activities. So Narada Muni just kind of left the palace silently and in astonishment over Krishna's activities. And then it kind of goes on. Then he goes to the other palaces, kind of getting basically greater and greater amazement, astonishment, over the Lord's activities. That's a type of rasa. It's like Arjuna became astonished at seeing the Virat Rupa. So not only did Narada Muni go to each of these palaces and see Krishna acting uniquely with a queen, but Lord Krishna did the same thing at every palace. He honored him and worshipped Narada Muni. And likewise, Narada Muni, the Bhagavatam explains, saw Uddhav and other dear devotees of the Lord manifesting simultaneously in all those palaces. So Narada Muni, as we know, is Srila Prabhupada calls him the transcendental spaceman. So the idea is that Narada Muni can, because he's not bound by the physical body, he can go at the speed of mind in a single moment. So that's what he did. Narada Muni went in one moment to 16,000 palaces and saw Krishna performing different activities at each place. And at a different time span of a day, one day, not many days, but it's like going to all the national parks and capturing a photo simultaneously at each park, which is at a different time in the day. So that's what he saw. And Bhagavatam describes us that, at certain times of the day, he was petting his children. At other times of the day, he was doing sacrifice. Another place, he was doing yagyas. Other time, so, feeding brahmanas, that's lunch. And this other stuff, is morning and eating remnants and etc. Chanting the Gayatri mantra, right? We know that occurs at 3 times in a day. Other places he's riding elephants, other parts he was consulting people, etc. So, he was other times he was meditating upon himself. Other places planning battles, other places trying to get engagement for his children. And then sent away all the children to their respective households, etc. So So seeing this, Narada Muni laughed and spoke to Rishikesh. So the idea is that Narada at all times of day saw all different activities occurring simultaneously. Like you'd be worshiping the rituals for worship at sunset or sunrise, chanting Gayatri, moving about, practicing sword practice, etc. So Narada Muni says, now we understand. Verse 38, now we understand your mystic potency, which are difficult to comprehend, even for great mystics. So the idea is, it may be difficult for us to comprehend Lord Krishna being married to 16,108 wives, but even somebody as powerful as Narada Muni was overwhelmed by what he saw. Only by serving your feet have I been able to perceive your powers. Yogeshvara Atman Nirbhata Bhavat Pada Nishevaya. O Lord of all mystic powers, O Supreme Soul, I have been, only by serving your feet can I perceive your Yogeshvara, Lord of all mystic potencies. And then he says, O Lord, please give me your leave. I will wander about the worlds which are flooded with your fame, singing your pastimes, which will purify the universe. Very nice. And Prabhupada and the commentators say even Narad Muni was bewildered to see these amazing pastimes of Lord. And so the Lord answered him. He said, I am the speaker of religion, its performer and its sanctioner. I observe religious principles to teach them to the world, so do not be disturbed. Because Narad Muni was feeling, oh, I've created an offense that the Lord is bathing my feet in each and every palace and then taking that onto my head. So Lord Krishna is trying to dispel that distress that Narad Muni is feeling. Like Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita says, yadyata charita shashtatta devatra janaha, that whatever a great person does, other people follow. So I bathe your feet in order to establish religious principles. So, that's what he's trying to indicate, that don't get distressed, my dear Narad, by seeing this activity of mine. So, something very nice that is said in one of these verses. By the commentator here that I found very sweet was, thus in every palace, Krishna Narad saw Lord in his same personal form executing transcendental principles of religion that purified those engaged in household affairs. So here's Santam Ekam Dadarshaha. And so the commentators say, all the activities of Lord in many paths were performed by the Lord's single spiritual form, meaning not separated expansions, but single spiritual form, which manifested in many places at once. This vision was revealed to him because of Lord's desire. Other residents of Dwarka, according to Vishnu Chakravarti, could see Krishna only in particular part of the city they occupied, not anywhere else. Thus, Lord gave special view to Narad Muni. So I'll end here. So hopefully, the main takeaway from this verse that I took for myself was the quality of appreciation is so important, that it endears one to Lord Krishna. And then the specific expansion, the specific manner in which Lord Krishna married and took care of 16,108 wives, and how amazing that was, because it was one form manifesting as many. And then how Lord Krishna can satisfy so many jivas by just one activity, like Narad Muni, because of Narad Muni's purity and his remembrance of Lord Krishna. This is like the Kurukshetra battle. Yes, Krishna was at the side of Arjuna in protecting him and the Pandavas and associated with that way. But if one steps back, Kurukshetra the battle was also an act of love between Lord Krishna and Shri Bhishma Dev. So by just one act, he pleases so many individuals, so many pure devotees. Thank you very much. Pancha kalpa tribhyascha kripo sindhubi eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Please correct me, make comments, realizations. It's 9 o'clock, 9:02.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dhanavad Pranam Jai Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentations, Prabhu. I like the way you have, revised all the previous verses in the beginning of your lecture, and how you highlighted the point of appreciation and glorification and to Krishna and his devotees is very, very important in our lives. Thank you so much for bringing up that point, Prabhu. And also later also you have mentioned, you went into deep into all how Krishna married 16,108, wives, and how they have felt, desire in their hearts with a lot of purity that, Krishna, they wanted Krishna as their husband. And Krishna, when fulfill their desire, because they have a very pure desire of having Krishna as a husband. And very nicely you narrated, Prabhu, little bit of all the pastimes and went. And finally, that one is very nice, Prabhu. Narada Muni, how he was wandering to see Krishna's activities. So if Narada Muni is not able to, pursue Krishna's energies and potencies and all that, I don't know how normal, devotees can pursue his, conceive his actually potencies and all that. It was very beautiful actually, how Narada Muni sees all the activities of Krishna, and he was very fortunate to see all of them, Prabhu. Prabhu, since you mentioned that in the beginning of your explanations that this section goes until 30th verse, right? So so I just went through the out of my curiosity, went through the just translation of 30th verse, Prabhu. I have a question of little bit. Is it okay to ask, Prabhu?
About this verse or 30th?
30th translation, Prabhu.
Okay.
So this is the continuation, right? So
yeah.
In the translation that all these women auspiciously glorified their lives despite their being without individuality and without purity. So I just want to understand what is this individuality? Without individuality means, how do we understand, Prabhu? Sorry if I'm asking the wrong question now, but
I think I did not delve into that because that was. Can you still hear me or no?
Yes, Prabhu, we can hear you.
So
No
so
problem.
I think Srila Prabhupada addresses that by talking about these comments by it's talking about bodily qualification, and that the bodily disqualification, like Lord Krishna speaks about this, in Bhagavad Gita, that if this is true for the Raja Rishis, how much true is those who have devotion towards me for the less qualified. So what this is speaking about is not the Kuru royal ladies. This is talking about about the 16,100 ladies that fell under, were captured by Bhamasura. That their purity as a result of being near Bhamasura was gone.
Yes.
So this is speaking about that. And
Yeah,
that
purity I could understand, but individuality, how do they lose their individuality? I didn't understand that point.
I would have to think about that. I would have to think about that one. I did not absorb myself in that particular. Let's see.
So Prabhu, I like the point also, like, how, Lord Krishna, even though he's Supreme Lord, following all the religious principles, and
Yes.
right, to show us that's what he said, the verses you have showed, Prabhu, very, very beautiful verses you shared from Srimad Bhagavatam. Thank you so much for that, Prabhuji. Yeah,
I thought I really like the Bhamasura pastime. I've heard it, many times, and I really liked the interplay between Narad Muni and Lord Krishna. That's really wonderful. Yesterday we were speaking about, appreciation when we were talking about the prayers of Prahlad Maharaj. And His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj said something very nice on that aspect, where he said, Prahlad was uplifted by the touch of Lord Nrsingadev. And also in reciprocation, Lord Nrsingadev was uplifted by the presence of Prahlad Maharaj, because it immediately pacified Prahlad Maharaj. So he said, this is devotional culture. The Lord appreciates the devotee, and the devotee appreciates the Lord. So and this is kind of a manifestation of the same principle here, where Bhagavan, Swayam Bhagavan Krishna appreciates Narad Muni's purity, and Narad Muni's appreciating that Krishna is inconceivable, and that even one very elevated personality cannot totally understand Krishna. Krishna can reveal to whatever extent he desires, and that's what he did with Narad Muni. Because, right, it says, we read where it says that others in Dwarka city were not able to see that. They could only see the palace that was within, their limited vision. So, yeah, this entire section, but one thing very nice that I heard once by Radhika Raman Prabhu is that whenever that just view the entire Bhagavatam as a thesis on relationships between Krishna and his devotees, between devotees and devotees, between demons and devatas, etc. And any time where you see what sounds inconceivable or contradictory, try to think about the essence of the relationship between that's going on at that time, and that will help us clarify something inconceivable. I thought that's very true when you look at the entirety of the Bhagavatam.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Radhika and Mataji, for the nice summarization, the Cliff's Notes of the lecture, and Srila Prabhupada's explanation. So, any other questions or comments? Or any other questions or additions that one wants to make? Okay. Vancha kalpatrubhyascha kripasindhabhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Please come if you can.